To say that the short history of nuclear energy started with a bang would be an understatement. However, since its devastating introduction, nuclear power has become a fairly well-accepted fuel source and has been in commercial use since the 1960s. Canada's first commercial reactor opened in Pickering, Ontario in 1972, back when nuclear power was in its infancy and was still being promoted as producing power that was too cheap to meter. This rhetoric turned out to be far from the truth and undercut many of the potential dangers of nuclear power on both the environment and the human race. One needs to look no further than the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, the 3 Mile Island accident in 1979, or the current 2011 Fukushima meltdown to see the potential catastrophic effects of nuclear power generation. One would think events like these would be troubling enough for governments to realize that nuclear power is not the perfect alternative that was destined to be. This, however, is not the case, as the current discourse surrounding nuclear power is once again touting its illustrious benefits and suggesting a possible resurgence in popularity as a clean energy alternative to other fossil fuel sources like coal and oil. Since production of nuclear power is likely to continue at an increased rate, society needs to begin seriously considering the most pressing matter concerning nuclear power generation: the long-term storage of nuclear waste. While it may sound like a ridiculous claim at first that the storage of nuclear waste is more important than potential future meltdowns, all it takes is for one to realize that nuclear waste remains radioactive for up to 100,000 years after it is used. This means that it needs to be kept far away from human contact for an astonishingly long period of time. A longer period of time than the entire history of modern civilization, in fact. And with the world already having produced around 250,000 tons of nuclear waste as of 2011, the heaping quantities of newly produced nuclear waste need to go somewhere. While many would naturally think that governments should just launch the waste into space where it will float around for an eternity with no possibility of it harming anyone, the chances of a rocket blowing up and dispersing radioactive particles all over the place is far too possible of a risk. Right now, the only semi-effective solution is to create deep geological repositories in the tough sedimentary rock buried hundreds of meters below the Earth's surface. Canada is currently in the beginning stages of building one of these waste repositories, just 1.2 kilometers off the shore of Lake Huron, right near the Bruce Nuclear Power Generating Station. This repository in development is set to replace Canada's current short-term method of managing nuclear waste that was only capable of housing the spent radioactive cores for a minuscule 50 years. This new facility, if built similar to other deep geological repositories like the Onklud repository in Finland, will be designed to last for a minimum of 100,000 years. These sites, however, can only get so full, and repositories like Onklud, for example, are only planned to be in use for roughly 100 years, at which point they will be sealed off, never to be set foot in by anyone ever again. Or so we hope. The reality is, it would be naive of people to think that they can predict so far into the future. In fact, the most challenging aspect of designing these deep underground repositories is how exactly do we communicate to future generations that this is land that should not be tampered with, that this is a place they should not live, and that they are currently standing where previous generations have buried extremely dangerous materials in an effort to protect them from causing serious harm. When time moves forward 100,000 years, things happen along the way. War, natural disaster, and loss of communication. Each one of these events is highly plausible and of major concern for the designers of these facilities. What if a weapon as powerful as a nuclear bomb, let alone one more powerful, is used close to one of these locations? The potential effects could be devastating. Or what if there is an earthquake that damages the inside of a repository, causing the radioactive waste to be soaked up into the ground and seep out into a body of water? Both are extremely possible scenarios. The idea of communicating with the unknown is such a complicated matter that there is simply no way of knowing if even the languages we use today will be around in 100,000 years. Just look to the numerous ancient languages that have become extinct throughout history as an example. And using symbols can be just as problematic of a language since meanings change over time, and trying to find universal symbols can be extremely challenging, as NASA's project attempting to communicate with extraterrestrial life messages from Earth showed. Another possible solution is to make the surrounding area look uninhabitable by placing objects like giant spikes all over the place, or some other sort of physical deterrent that would make the land appear uninviting and dangerous. However, this method is just as likely to intrigue future generations to explore in the same way that structures like Stonehenge or the Great Pyramids pique our curiosity. The difficulty surrounding the communication of nuclear waste is a puzzling one for sure. Yet, the question at the end of the day is, if we are not capable of positively ensuring that the nuclear waste produced in the present will be kept safe from the future, is it really ethical to be producing it in the first place? Like the fight against climate change, the future is our responsibility.